Good afternoon. Welcome to Polity with Davina. I've got some water, not tea, but I'm here to discuss the debate last night, commemorate September 11 respectfully, because it's a tragedy and an attack that's had repercussions across the world, and particularly for American politics and American society. I live in America. It's an Australian accent. I'm in Massachusetts. I've lived here for the last 3 years, but I've been heavily invested in American politics since Donald Trump announced his run, because I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. And I heard the resonance of fascist rhetoric when he was vilifying migrants from Mexico for political capital for himself, for personal gain. And today we're talking about Elon being creepy as well, because Taylor Swift, hooray, Taylor Swift, endorsed Kamala Harris last night after the debate, and Elon sent out a very creepy text, which I will now read. No, not text, sorry, post to Twitter, which he bought for $44 billion and renamed X, and has devoted himself to amplifying and promoting Donald Trump. And Trump has even implied that he would offer Elon Musk a place in his cabinet, has said he likes electric vehicles now and that Elon's a great guy, et cetera, et cetera. It is not a surprise that Elon Musk has polluted this particular social media platform after purchasing it with just as much right-wing content and restoring the accounts of Nazis and doing everything he can to promote a xenophobic, racist, anti-migrant worldview on this platform in order to try and help increase Donald Trump's chances of being elected. So, yes, let's have a look. Elon wrote last night, "Fine, Taylor, you win. I will give you a child and guard your cats with my life." So they're not dating. He's just offering to impregnate her or donate one of his 11 children by a variety of different women to Taylor Swift. It's the creepiest thing he ever heard. And I believe one of his alienated children, who now goes by the name Vivian, she wrote that, yes, it was a heinous incel thing to write by a heinous incel. Very apt terminology for Elon Musk, heinous incel, because the man treated his first wife, according to her, as if she was more of an accessory than a person, asked her to dye her hair blonde, and told her frequently that were she an employee of his, he would fire her. So she found it very restorative to her sense of self and her soul to not be in a relationship with Elon Musk anymore, but they have 4 children together. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I should not talk too much about Elon Musk, because as much as he's trying to help promote hatred and divisiveness on this particular social media platform that I'm currently live streaming to, hi Elon, yes, I use Twitter, and yes, I paid you for the privilege because I broadcast frequently in the lead up to 2020 election, and you took that privilege away from me by making it something only a paid account could do. And I stream live so that I can put a perspective out there. My perspective being a culturally Jewish Holocaust survivor relative who knows when people are forming a coalition to try and defeat democracy, to try and corruptly promote themselves so that they can get into positions of power, and then and abuse people's worst instincts to otherize and villainize and stigmatize demographic groups in order to use that potential darkness in the human soul, that capacity that we have to turn to irrational hate when we have anxieties or fears about things. And the thing about racism is it makes you more vulnerable to being gullible. It makes you more vulnerable to put your trust in people who reflect back to you, who validate your racist fears and concerns, your unconscious sense of unease that you're losing dominance or the status quo is changing, and your feelings of normalcy are being ruffled by changes. Someone who who purposefully appeals to you, who weaponizes the worst in yourself and in people who share your ideas, be it in your community or your religious affiliation. That is a con artist and a cheat who will abuse that gullibility to be degenerate in office, to sell American interests short, as Hitler abused the people of Germany, outside of murdering and abusing the Jewish people, the homosexual people, the political opponents that he could have locked up in concentration camps. It's a very historically tested tactic. Demonize a minority group to create a groundswell of fevered support and then exploit that all the way into office, and then ratchet up the cruelty and the militarism until you are eventually deposed by something, whether it be a military loss from decent countries having to lose millions of lives in a militaristic effort to defeat you, or whether your own people turn against you and depose you and hang you. I guess Mussolini lost militarily first before the people of Italy, who caught him, hung him and his wife. Anyway, let's read Taylor's endorsement because it's beautiful. So Taylor Swift, someone summed it up by saying, "I'm endorsing Harris in part because I believe a woman's right to choose is important." But Taylor's actual words were, "Like many of you, I watched the debate tonight. If you haven't already, now is a great time to do your research on the issues at hand and the stances these candidates take on the topics that matter to you the most. As a voter, I made sure to watch and read everything I can about their proposed policies and plans for this country." She also wrote, "The simplest way to combat misinformation is with the truth." She wrote that she will be casting her vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the 2024 presidential election. "I'm voting for Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them. I think she's a steady-handed, gifted leader, and I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos. I was so heartened and impressed by her selection of running mate Tim Walz, who has been standing up for LGBTQ+ rights, IVF, and a woman's right to her own body for decades. I've done my research and I've made my choice. Your research is all yours to do and the choice is yours to make. I also want to say, especially to first-time voters, remember that in order to vote, you have to be registered. I also find that it's much easier to vote early. I'll link where to register and find early voting dates and info in my story. With love and hope, Taylor Swift, Childless Cat Lady." So it's beautiful, her emphasis on the need to register as a precursor to voting, and the need to vote early if possible because it's easier. And you want to smooth your pathway to voting because, particularly if you're a Democratic voter, because there are Republicans out there, Republican elected officials, Republican politicians who are passing laws, who are taking steps to try and put bumps in your path. People have reported finding themselves listed as inactive on the polls, even though they've voted in every election. They're being heavy-handed with cleaning up the rolls in terms of taking people off if they haven't voted, which is weird. I mean, if it's your democratic right to choose if you want to vote or not, why is your capacity to vote then sabotaged by you being placed on an inactive status and removed from the voter rolls simply for not voting at other times? Really weird, and more than weird, malicious. It's a malicious step done with the intent to sabotage people participating in their democracy. Democracy is very important. Don't listen to Republicans tell you we're a republican, not a democracy. This is a democracy. A republic is a form of democracy in which you have representative elected, democratically elected leaders who then vote on legislation and things, rather than people deciding via voting on an amendment or voting on in a referendum for every single policy decision made by government. Instead, the shortcut is electing a representative that you think has not only professed values that are in alignment with you, but who appears to be a sincere, trustworthy person. Because there's no point voting for someone who says the right things and then betrays you and votes in a way that's entirely counter to their professed stance initially. Oh, I lost my light. Let's see if I can fix that. So there's a few people listening. Feel free to comment. For a while, I couldn't see comments posted via Twitter, but now I can. So if you want to chime in, if there are any regular listeners out there, I'm happy to chat. We used to have such an abundance of Trump supporters who would spam my broadcast when it was Periscope, when Twitter had a live broadcasting platform called Periscope. I always do have this slight concern in the back of my head that Elon Musk will get mad if he realizes, and I presume the man spends a lot of time online, that he's terminally online, taking drugs and Googling his own name and looking for hashtags in which he appears, so that if he sees my broadcast, that he will do things on purpose to restrict the reach of this account. But it's a risk I'm willing to take because I think it's so important to call out Elon Musk for acting in an entirely anti-democratic fashion by promising that he's interested and committed to free speech and then deploying the substantial resources available to him to push for Trump's election, to say not only, oh, I'm endorsing Trump, but to say, I think America is doomed unless Trump is voted for. Now, unless Trump is elected. Now, one thing that's so important for me today, because of all the messaging of people like Elon Musk who harness the faulty assumptions of people out there who think that Republicans are good economically, act in a responsible way, are fiscally prudent, etc. It's all false identity. It's all a fabricated reputation. The actual record, the achievements of Republicans is counter to the economic interests of most Americans. And it's Republicans who give tax credits for purchases of personal jets, personal airplanes, who give tax cuts to the uber wealthy and temporary tax cuts to some people in the middle class, and then start tariff wars that sabotage the agricultural industry, that hurt farmers, and then claim to recompense them with $28 billion of taxpayer money, but distribute it unfairly. Anyway, there's someone who did a great video about it, and I'm going to play the video. It's a short video from TikTok, and pause it, and we'll discuss some of the evidence backing the assertions made in that video. So I'm very happy to do that because for years I have wanted people who feel highly qualified in the economic realm to detail substantively how bad Trump was for the United States economy, even before he willfully mismanaged the pandemic. Oh, and we'll also play this little point that Kamala Harris made that's so important because she was highlighting in the debate last night that Trump is someone who can be purchased for flattery and favors. It's great. It summarizes the ways in which you can manipulate Trump with quid pro quos financially or influentially in a sphere of influence, or just by telling him he's amazing and you love him, because he loves to tout that dictators love him. He loves to say Putin looks up to me. President Xi of China looks up to me. Kim Jong-un and I wrote each other love letters. He has this ridiculous, very fascist admiration for despots. And his former chief of staff, retired 4-star General John Kelly, a Gold Star father, had said of Trump that he had expressed admiration for Hitler. He confirmed that he thought it was amazing that Hitler inspired such loyalty in his generals. And John Kelly reported that he had to correct Trump and say, well, actually, some of Hitler's generals plotted to assassinate him. So all that loyalty and amazing qualities that Donald Trump thinks belonged to Hitler, it's not true. Let's listen to this.
Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch. Understand.
Yes. And so what was the number she gave? Because it's very important. Do you want your iPad, darling? You can grab it. Oh, well, was it 60,000? It was a lot. Anyway, a lot of Polish Americans living in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is going to be one of the key states, given that the outcome of the election is dependent on how things pan out at an electoral college level, meaning the vestigially racist system of weighting states differently rather than just letting each person's vote count for one vote, and having the winner of the election in a popular vote sense be the winner. Instead, we have this complexities of the electoral college system, which people are lied to, have been lied to for decades in schools, and told that this is to balance out big states versus little states, which is to say to anthropomorphize states. Anthropomorphize meaning attribute human qualities, as if a bigger state can be a bully and a smaller state is a vulnerable person requiring of protection. And it's not true, because a smaller state is just a smaller state. It's not a person. It has the number of voters that it has. And its interests do not have to be protected in that way, but they were protected in that way as a conciliatory measure given to smaller states that had higher proportions of wealthy slave owners as voters at that time that the Constitution was written. So because of that vestigial, leftover, holdout, conciliatory cookie for slave owners, that their smaller states could, with higher proportions of agricultural industry dependent on its profit levels being maintained, if they were able to continue to not pay their labor force and in fact grow their labor force through extremely immoral means, i.e. slavery related methods. We're not going to talk about it, but it should be of interest to people. The call to eliminate the electoral college should be growing as people tweak to what a falsity it is to say that the little guys need to be protected when they mean little states. And what they really mean is little agricultural states like Wyoming, with a smaller population of wealthy people who've inherited a lot of farmland property from people who used to own slaves, and whose political thoughts and ideologies are still shaped by that history and by their own inheritance and self-interest, that they're more likely to distort the outcome of an election in favor of someone who panders to calcified racism, calcified racist thinking, and the kind of people who are rendered more gullible to the deceits of a con artist who weaponizes the some people's tendency to think in a racist fashion, to disparage others, to disparage migrants, to believe lies as long as it involves believing the worst of migrant groups or minority groups, be it Black people, be it Jewish people, be it people from Mexico, people from Latin America. The kind of gullibility that is attendant to passed on racist thoughts that have been burnished and fed and amplified by exploitative right-wing media channels such as Fox News via Rupert Murdoch, who is a racist originally from Australia. Mea culpa. Well, not mea culpa, but my country produced that man. And the remaining rusted on racism in Australian society helped produce Rupert Murdoch. And it's a symbiotic, self-sustaining racism because he feeds racism back into Australian society as well as American society and English society, causing very negative political outcomes across those multiple continents and countries. So boo to Rupert Murdoch for lying to people. There's a reason they had to pay so many millions of dollars in damages for lying to their audience about the outcome of the 2020 election. And that reason is they lied to help keep the door open for influence to Donald Trump and to gratify and sustain the hurt feelings of those Republican voters who were outraged that Trump lost and who believed his pattern of lies about it being a stolen election, even though all of the evidence of the lost 60 court cases, the exposure of Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell as being unhinged, say anything, people often with substance abuse problems who just threw things at the wall, who spitballed at a wall to see what could stick with the Fox audience, with Republican voters who had their capacity to evaluate evidence diminished by their refusal to believe anybody other than a Trump-friendly network. What I've got up on screen now is a graph showing that tariffs do raise prices, plain and simple. This is a big one for me because Donald Trump pretends that he is good at making economic policy. And this falsity is of particular consequence because it sucks in people, it sucks in even some voters who can see that he's of bad character, malicious, defames people, even if they understand that he commits fraud. They might think, well, he committed fraud, but it was just to benefit himself. I want him to benefit America, so I'll still entrust the American economy to him a second time. Trump will talk your ear off about how he's going to introduce tariffs and that's going to solve any problem the American economy has or American society has. If childcare is too expensive and is hampering women's ability to return to the workforce after childbirth, he says, yes, well, my solution to that, asked to give what specific policy solutions he would instigate. He says, tariffs, because it's going to get so much money. The numbers are so huge that, then of course that's going to solve childcare. But here we have laundry machine prices. Tariffs start in 2018 when Trump introduces them, adds $200 to the price of laundry machines until, look, these tariffs end in 2023 and then the prices fall. And there's the core CPI inflation rate going up as well, but the prices of laundry machines have gone down to be more in line with that core inflation rate rise, which has been a global phenomenon following the supply line constraints after a global pandemic, as well as the constraints to international trade caused by Putin launching a war of aggression against Ukraine, with eyes to other parts of Europe as well. Very important to remind people of that, because there are Polish Americans, there are other people with family members and connections to other countries in Europe that know historically, that know viscerally that Putin is an imperialist with delusions of grandeur who will massacre people in those countries, in Poland, in Yugoslavia, in Czechoslovakia, just as Hitler did, through military means, to burnish his own ego and expand the motherland. And that kind of conquest, visions of conquest that are achieved in extremely bloody fashions. I once read a post from someone in Ukraine who said, you don't know how good you have it to be able to sit in your home and eat snacks in peace. And I was like, yes, it is very easy for us to shut off the problems happening in other parts of the world. But Putin is a part of the world that has not only brought murder, rape, and pillaging to Ukraine, destruction of infrastructure, bombing of schools and hospitals and places of worship and roads, and massacring civilians, as well as members of the military in Ukraine that have sought to push back against the invasion. But Putin wants to bring his problems to us. Putin has exported division. He's exported disinformation about vaccines, about health and safety measures, in order to have people distrust each other, in order to people to distrust fact-based reporting in the media. And I'm sometimes rude about the media's ability to minimize or omit a very necessary focus on Trump's criminal and exploitative and incompetent and financially imprudent behavior, just because they have Republican mega donors as owners of a few consolidated media platforms. But it's still important to be able to listen to the media periodically and not entirely write it off as being fake news, or Lügenpresse, as Hitler used to say, to disparage the press as lying press, and get a type of freedom from accountability that you get when your loyal followers no longer pay any attention to fact-based reporting on the outcomes of your actions. So, this is my very important thing. Here we go.
2020, 3 years into his presidency, before the pandemic even began.
All right, so I'm just going to pause it and look. This is it's called Continuing Pride Month 2.0. That's the name of the TikTok account. I'm going to have to follow them because this is the most potent 220 seconds, 2 minutes and 20 seconds I've seen, because he's got the receipts. I've talked about these issues ad nauseum myself, but this reporting brings more details than I have ever been able to report. So it's inspiring for me that I should work harder and I should bring these specific details to the table as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to amplify this message and pause it, and we're going to talk about it more.
Economic performance. Don't believe me? Here are 10 facts about economic performance. Don't believe me? Here are 10 facts about the state of the Trump economy in January 2020, 3 years into his presidency, before the pandemic even began. Fact 1, Trump failed on jobs, and he failed badly. Trump created 1.5 million fewer jobs in his first 3 years in office than Obama created in his final 3 years. Fact 2, Trump failed on manufacturing. His poorly planned trade wars caused a nationwide manufacturing recession in 2019. Manufacturing job losses were especially acute in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Fact 3, Trump failed steelworkers. Thousands of steelworkers got layoff notices right before Christmas in 2019. Fact 4, Trump failed coal miners. 11 mining companies went bankrupt before the end of 2019. Fact 5, Trump failed farmers. He caused the worst farm crisis since the 1980s. In 2019, farm bankruptcies soared 24%. Trump handed out billions in farm bailouts, but the process was corrupt. Big, wealthy farmers got massive handouts. Small farmers were left with peanuts. Fact 6. In Wisconsin, Trump's trade policies destroyed dairy farms. 818 Wisconsin dairy farmers went bankrupt in 2019 alone. Fact 7. The Trump economy failed the poor. Between 2017 and 2019, poverty grew in 1/3 of all U.S. counties. Fact 8. Despite rising poverty, Trump began 2020 with a plan to cut food stamps for 700,000 recipients, further devastating rural communities. Fact 9. Trump promised to eliminate the debt. Instead, he gave tax cuts to the already rich and created new incentives to send jobs overseas. By 2019, the economy was slowing fast and the debt was growing at $1 trillion a year. Fact 10. As 2020 began, Trump's failed policies had brought to an end the Obama-Biden recovery, the longest U.S. economic expansion in history. We all remember how Trump's mishandling of the pandemic caused the economy to crash in 2020. But we shouldn't forget that the Trump economy failed before that. The 2020 Trump recession started in February 2020 before COVID lockdowns even began.
That was Continuing Pride Month, but I noticed there was something that said ex-reporter on it as well. I wonder if that's the original maker of the video, and that then the Continuing Pride Month account is amplifying that. I'm just happy to be amplifying the amplification, because those are such important points. I've shared headlines before on this platform to show that in October of 2019, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan were states that were losing manufacturing jobs hand over fist, and that it was beginning to impact adjacent industry sectors in the transport and storage industries. Because when Trump said trade wars are good and easy to win, and was posturing the tough man image that fascists try and project, and he understands how important it is to be successful as a fascist appealing politician, to project strength and to continually talk up your own strength and posture and perform as a strongman. So he instigated some tariffs with American trading partners, not just China, but Canada, but Mexico, and not specifically targeted tariffs either, just these very broad tariffs against imported agricultural products that then made the Chinese, or prompted the Chinese, to institute retaliatory tariffs and to just stop ordering food items from US farmers. Soybeans, corn, all of these industries, all of these farmers suddenly had their trading relationships sabotaged and severed in front of their eyes. And Trump threw $28 billion at the problem to try and stop farmers from feeling that loss in their pocketbooks as heavily. But as that video points out, or that voiceover in the video points out, it wasn't equitably distributed either. So Trump, as a fascist, wealthy people pandering politician that he is, favored wealthy people who could apply for the handouts, the bailouts, through certain banks. So smaller farmers who perhaps had loans through credit unions did not have as easy a pathway to apply for that money, and subsequently didn't receive it. And farmers went bankrupt, but more small farmers went bankrupt. And the manufacturing sector that often imports component parts from China and then assembles them into larger products and sells them to American consumers, those people were dealing with higher prices and feeling that pinch, and then pushing manufacturers out of business and causing Americans to lose their jobs in the manufacturing sector. So impacting profits, pushing up the prices of consumer goods, impacting inflation, growing inflation. And that's a Trump outcome. It was a Trump outcome, and I've often said I think it caused Trump to misbehave at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, because he was trying to change the beginning of the reporting, because it was not broadly being reported on yet that there was a manufacturing recession. The headline that I produce is from the LA Times that was reporting on that manufacturing recession. It was a small amount of reporting. It needs to build and take off before it hits national messaging platforms. And Trump wanted to shut down that story and replace it with different reporting on a manufacturing positive outcome, such as signing a new trade deal with China. So he was trying to curry favor with President Xi of China and saying, yep, okay, they've got this disease we're hearing about, COVID-19, but President Xi is so great, he's handling it beautifully. It's all going to be fine, nothing to worry about. Now that was an outcome of Trump's trade disaster, Trump's manufacturing recession, that he could not deal logically with a pandemic because he was trying to manipulate the media into reporting on a manufacturing success story, a new trade deal, rather than the reality of his manufacturing recession, particularly in critical background states for his re-election prospects in 2020 of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So it's important. It's important to know all of those points. I'm going to have to head off now, but thank you to those who've listened. I hope I'll be able to broadcast again tonight. We'll play clips from the debate. We will celebrate Kamala Harris's universally acknowledged win over Donald Trump. Such a win that Trump followers on Twitter that I saw were saying, well, she clearly was being fed the answers. So they're acknowledging that her answers were superior to Trump's, and they have to find an excuse for it. It's called massaging one's ego when one has received some kind of a cognitive dissonance blow. Oh, this man that we say is so great, and this woman that we have disparaged so heavily, taking our lead from Trump without actually watching her or knowing anything about her ourselves. Trump supporters haven't watched Kamala Harris when she was a senator masterfully question Brett Kavanaugh. They didn't watch her accomplishments as the Attorney General of California. They don't know how incisive her mind is, how quick-witted she is, how she's able to store information and pull out an argument ending point. So they learned last night. They done learned, and I'm happy for it. And I will talk to you all soon, and we will discuss the debate more if you're interested in following along. Until then, check your voter registration or get registered. Early vote where possible, because it's very important to build up a bank of those early votes, and so that people can't delay or obstruct or throw some spanner into the process, that you get your vote done so that you can get counted, you can contribute to the defeat of Donald Trump and the joyful election of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Because whilst the executive branch, the three branches of government in the United States, the executive branch at a federal level isn't responsible for everything, but it's still key. It's a key part of American leadership, and definitely having a corrupt con artist grifter like Donald Trump in office causes mass death and bad economic outcomes for many, many millions of people. Manufacturing people lose their jobs. He starts tariff wars that raise inflation for everybody, and he does favors for his corrupt buddies and the uber wealthy who have pandered to him. That's all from me. Thank you for your time and attention. Bye.